back to Drunk on Writing and the latest episode of the Tarantino Dissection. It's brought to you in part through the patronage of Ariya Norinth. Today, in this special dissection excerpt, we're taking a closer look at Pulp Fiction's opening and closing segments from the diner to Ezekiel and back. Now, Pulp Fiction is a wild ride of a film that goes in many a surprising direction, but perhaps nothing is as wild as its very first few seconds, where we're presented a definition. Talk about highbrow. And until recently, I always assumed that first definition, the one about soft, moist, shapeless matter, was simply kept in to match the dictionary, to give audiences a moment's pause. But both of those definitions work for this film, don't they? Lurid subject matter. Check, definitely. Soft, moist, shapeless mass of matter? Check, check. Check, 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 and check, and check. But we're still digesting that as the film truly begins, just as Reservoir Dogs did, in a diner, in the midst of someone's conversation. These someone's not a gang of tuxedoed burglars, but rather a rather colorful couple, Honey Bunny and Pumpkin, discussing, well, okay, robbery. So the apple didn't fall far. We'll talk a bit more about them later, but before we move on, there's something fun about this scene that's maybe not readily apparent. It's already introducing us to the circular time play that Pulp Fiction would come to be known for. In case you never caught it, while our focus is on Honey Bunny and Pumpkin, a few minutes into the opening scene, you can clearly hear Sam Jackson's Jules say, "Yeah, I was sitting here eating my muffin."
Yeah. Correct. Same as Banks.
We'll hear it from his side at the end of the film.
Yeah. I was sitting there eating my muffin.
But sticking to this beginning, not long after that, John Travolta's Vincent strolls through the background, as we know, on his way to the bathroom. Now, those interesting cross-references are a bit tricky to catch, but the others are fairly obvious. The scene ends on a freeze frame of Honey Bunny as she shouts her line. It's the only freeze frame in the movie. We'll come back to that in just a second. Because that line of hers, no, I'm not going to say it, it changes. We hear it one way here, and when we see her again later in the movie, we hear it a different way, with a different delivery. Why? Tarantino says it was intentional to show we're seeing the same events from different perspectives, which don't always align. But could it be something more? Could it be a reflection of divine intervention? Perhaps. Perhaps Tarantino watched 1985's Clue, and the events we follow are just one way it all could have happened. It's a heady theory, I know, as most Pulp Fiction theories are, so let's move on. But keep that in the back of your head as we keep going, because that freeze frame dovetails into the relatively long credits, but more importantly, our first taste of the film's scoreless soundtrack, Dick Dale's surf rock rendition of Miserlou. Tarantino said he picked surf rock for the film's motif as, to him, it just sounds like rock and roll. And I happen to agree with it. And I also think that the soundtrack, which includes snippets of dialogue like we'd seen in Reservoir Dogs soundtrack, and like that soundtrack, the music in Pulp Fiction was a particular highlight in this film for me, and something that really sets it apart from some of its other contemporaries. Now, the credits give way to our introduction to Jules and Vincent. And after that opening, seeing them, it's almost comforting, isn't it? It's even more familiar than that diner if you've already seen Reservoir Dogs, but in a way, a heightened form of what we've already seen. Because yes, while we do get the banter about the metric system, which seems very on brand and very inspired by Tarantino's own time in Amsterdam, where Vincent just so happened to have been, we also get the foot massage anecdote, which is not a throwaway line, not a one-off monologue, but seemingly a simple way to introduce the godlike figure that is Marcellus Wallace, which is what this entire scene truly is, even though we don't yet see him. In a lesser film, we would have cut away to him throwing Rocky Horror to his death, which would have been cool, don't get me wrong, but unnecessary, because his presence already hangs over everyone and everything in this scene. After all, he is the one who sent Jules and Vincent. He is the one who got screwed over. Of course, the situation also culminates with the infamous line, "Does he look like a bitch?" and leads to the ominous recitation of the half-made-up Ezekiel 25:17. Almost as if it's not from the Bible we know. Maybe it's from the Marcellus Wallace translation. Though it's likely more a nod to Sweet Jesus Preacher Man and nearly word for word lifted from Bodigadu Kiba, aka The Bodyguard. It was also directly taken from an early draft of From Dusk Till Dawn, so there's that as well. And let us not forget the mysterious briefcase and its 666 combination and golden glow, a glow that's immediately repeated multiple times during Brett's subsequent execution. What is in the briefcase, though? Those Reservoir Dogs diamonds? Seems like that was the original plan, according to Avery, but as Tarantino now likes to say, it's whatever the viewer wants it to be. I read someone somewhere who posited that it could even be Elvis's gold suit. That true? Maybe. The theory I've heard most over the years is that it's Marcellus's soul. Proponents of this theory point to that shaved neck bandage on the back of Marcellus's neck, which is said to be where the devil removed it, as well as that combination. But let's be honest here. Other than 1, 2, 3, which was, and I swear this is true, at one point the combination to my briefcase, 666 has got to be one of the most common combinations in certain circles, right? And if you think about it, Marcellus Wallace certainly doesn't seem to be too soulful when he orders his men to scour the earth looking for Bush later, right? He would have had his soul back at that point. And maybe if that were an accurate theory, maybe he would have acted differently. Unless the soul doesn't really do a whole heck of a lot for one's character. So I personally think it probably does. So I don't think it's that. I don't think it's that theory. For the record, though, all that was in the briefcase was an orange light bulb. Beautiful. These storylines come to a head later on in the film, after everything with Mia, everything with Butch, everything with the wolf, when Vincent so coyly asks Jules, "Feel like having breakfast with me?" That all brings us back full circle, back to the beginning, back to Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, who we come to find out are really Ringo and Yolanda. I've never met a Ringo in real life. I feel like it's a made-up name. I don't think there's really a Ringo out there. But we don't focus on them this time, but rather keep our attention on Jules and Vincent and their conversation, which, while it starts casual enough and gives us a nice vocal callback to the start with that, I wouldn't go so far as to call a dog a filthy animal. As the dialogue grows more intense, as Jules reveals he's going to walk the earth.
What you mean walk the earth?
As Vincent argues against the so-called miracle, we follow the pattern set by Vincent and Mia's Jackrabbit Slim encounter and slowly zoom cut in, starting from a shot of the two, then a medium close-up, then a tighter one, and somehow tighter still, building up to that moment we know is coming with that "Garçon, coffee" line tossed in as a reminder in case we're not fully up to speed. Though not before Vincent takes his final trip to the bathroom, leaving Jules to deal with the situation on his own. Well, at the start.
Jules, you give that fucking Nimrod $1,500 and I'll shoot him on general principle.
Though it originally included a what-if scenario of sorts with Jules shooting them both, in the final cut, this ending is a relatively quiet, introspective, redemptive scene. Aside from Honey Bunny's ride or die reaction when Jules grabs Ringo anyway. I love that. I love that entire thing. But a lot happens here. From the bad motherfucker wallet, Tarantino's wallet, by the way, and a reference to Shaft, obviously, to that renewed use of the Ezekiel quote, which makes you wonder as it's being said, doesn't it? Is Jules going to kill Ringo on the other side of the quote? That's what he says he always uses it for, after all. And we know this isn't the end of his or Vincent's story, so killing Ringo here would almost make sense, right? But Jules doesn't. Ringo, who's just glimpsed what's in the briefcase, and perhaps a nod to 1972's Superfly, Jules tells him it's his boss's dirty laundry. But whatever is inside, well, like I said,
It's beautiful.
but Ringo, he gets a second lease on life thanks to Jules buying his life. And in the end, everyone walks out. Everyone goes home. Well, not literally. Jules and Vincent go to the club to meet up with Marcellus. Pumpkin and Honey Bunny, I don't know what they do. They leave. But you get the point. And what a wonderful walkout Jules and Vincent have. Slow, methodical, that half turn and tuck, all set to the lively one's Surf Rider. Just brilliant. And a wonderful, meaningful way to end the film that you wouldn't have gotten if the film were presented chronologically. This has been a Drunk on Writing dissection excerpt exploring Pulp Fiction's opening and closing segments. If you enjoyed this episode, please be sure to check out the other excerpts or the full Pulp Fiction dissection. If you'd like more like these, please subscribe to the channel or head on over to drunkonwriting.com where you can get more episodes more often. Until next time, cheers. Keep on writing.